Hello out there, how are you guys doing? My name is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and welcome back. So today I wanted to take another opportunity to talk about Metroid Prime 4, something which I never get sick of discussing or getting excited about. And this is something that really has been brought to my attention several times. Some of my live streams, comment sections in my videos, conversations on Twitter and on the internet. And it's this idea of whether or not Metroid Prime 4 needs to possibly take a radical shift in a completely new, or at least extremely new direction compared to previous games in the series. Now, this conversation has been pretty common talk amongst Nintendo fans and Nintendo Switch gamers the past couple of weeks, and honestly even since the Switch came out, because we've seen that happen with some of Nintendo's biggest franchises so far. Obviously with Breath of the Wild, that was a huge change to the Zelda formula, the Zelda franchise, and it worked wonderfully. Mario Odyssey is a smaller change to the Mario formula than Breath of the Wild was to Zelda, but it still represents a lot of new ideas and a lot of new features and a whole kind of new feel and approach to a Mario game compared to what we've done in previous 3D Mario games as well, and it is kind of being heralded as a pretty big polar shift for the series, and like I said, I think it's more of a middle ground between the same old 3D Mario and a big change like Breath of the Wild, but it does still count to this conversation. And then even recently, some of the rumors about what Game Freak is trying to do behind the scenes, possibly with the console Pokémon game coming out for the Nintendo Switch sometime in the future, that maybe they're inspired by how successful the changes to Zelda and Mario have been, and so they want to do something similar for the Pokemon series. And through that, everyone has been talking, more so than even normal, about all of these great franchises that Nintendo has, and it works so well for Zelda, and it works so well for Mario. They're going to do it with Pokemon. Maybe other series need to do the same thing. Maybe Metroid Prime 4 should do that. So it should be noted that I totally get that line of thinking. I totally get why it's also exciting when you think about a new entry in any franchise, in any gaming franchise, whether it's Nintendo or not, whether it's one you enjoy or not, or even if it's like a movie franchise. At some point you start to think, man, well, we need a lot of newness. We need some new things. There needs to be new features, new gameplay, new story elements, so many different things, new control functions. And that is how you evolve a game series, and that's how you evolve gaming as a hobby. It's how you evolve and continue to improve on what you've done previously. That's something that should always be seen as pretty much a good thing. So I do understand why when it comes to Metroid, coming off of all these other great Nintendo changes, it makes a lot of sense for people to get excited and want to say, well, Metroid Prime 4 could be really, really different, or at least that it should be really different. Some people have definitely brought that up to me, that they're hoping to see Metroid Prime 4 be crazy, crazy different. But here's the thing, you guys. I think that a lot of people who've brought that up, at least in the conversations I've seen and in the conversations I've had, it's felt like it's folks putting forward the idea who aren't really considering the fact that Metroid Prime 4 is indeed a sequel. I think it's people thinking, well, this is the new Nintendo, this is the Switch Nintendo, they just did it with Breath of the Wild, they just did it with Mario Odyssey, so why wouldn't they do it with their other huge franchise, Metroid? It just makes so much sense for them to do that. But again, just because this is going to be the first new Metroid game on a console in a long time, and the first new Metroid game for the Nintendo Switch, that doesn't mean that this game demands a change. This isn't Metroid XYZ. This isn't Metroid the Samus Fight for the Future, or Metroid Samus, tries to kick some space pirate butt, or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Samus the Revenge. It's not that. It is Metroid Prime number 4. It is a sequel to an already established series, an already established story, and a trilogy. And there are a lot of things that this game has to do that those previous games also did. I mean, think about it. Breath of the Wild wasn't a sequel to a previous Zelda game. It was just another Zelda game that happened to make radical shifts and change huge elements of the Zelda game to create what Breath of the Wild was. It was just its own game, Breath of the Wild, that happens to be Zelda and feature Link and Zelda and Ganon and some of these other things. Mario Odyssey isn't a sequel. It's not like it's Odyssey Part 2. It's just Odyssey. It's its own brand new game, brand new Mario games, brand new Zelda games like this. They're essentially anthology-esque, where there isn't so much like a... I mean, there is a timeline with Zelda that is true, but I think you still understand what I'm saying, where there's an element of newness and freshness, and it's its own story. This is the Mario and Bowser and Peach in this game doing these things that has no correlation to previous games. This is the Link and the Zelda in this game, and yes, there's a timeline where they are related, but it's its own thing don't think about how this is like a sequel to events you've seen necessarily in the past. That's not what we're doing here. It's just its own game with its own title, which is vastly different than what Metroid Prime 4 is, because like I said, it is number 4. So I get how maybe we might get excited about the idea of Nintendo doing the same thing and changing up the Metroid formula with Metroid Prime 4. But there are certain things that can't happen. I personally don't think, and maybe some of you disagree, and hell, maybe somehow Nintendo shocks us and surprises me and proves me wrong, but I don't expect that. So one of the things really they can't do, I don't think, with Metroid Prime 4, you guys, is like not make it first person, for example. The game has to be first person. I believe they've confirmed that, which is good news. But that's an idea. That's an example of the kind of thing where this Metroid game has to probably do that, because it is a sequel to the first 3 games, which were all first person. They all shared so much DNA. The engine, the look, the feel, the graphics, the controls, even though they changed with the Wii version, but then they retroactively included it. The scanning, the visors, the way your arm cannon upgraded itself, all these different things. The way the spider ball and the spider ball puzzles and the traversal through all the different levels, and the music and the reflections in the visor. There's so many like tonal and graphical and auditory things that are so specific to all 3 Metroid Prime games. It's not like each game had radical changes to it. They were all very much the same DNA with small minor adjustments and evolutions. That's the way you do it. You do it in small ways when you're making a new game within a same lineage of series, where they are literally numbered sequels to each other. So Metroid Prime 4 can't like suddenly be this third-person game or this side-scrolling game. That just wouldn't make sense for the Prime DNA. Also, continuing the graphics conversation, well, obviously the graphics should be much, much better. I don't think we need like a whole new art style and, you know, a complete shift and change in the character models and the way the enemies and the space pirates looked and the Metroid enemies and the new things that they introduced, and even Samus herself. Like, there needs to be a fair level of continuity between the whole visual tonality to the game and the whole general art direction and art style being used. Again, much more powerful hardware than the last brand new Metroid Prime came out on. That was on the Wii. That is 2 generations ago. And so the technology and the power and everything that the Switch allows us to do visually obviously is vastly improved from the best we've seen from a Prime game. So it is certainly time to see that upgraded. Some people talk about rumors that it might be running on Unreal Engine 4. I think that would be certainly cool and exciting, because we know the Switch can utilize Unreal Engine 4 very, very well. And I think that it could actually make a very beautiful Metroid game. But it makes me just think of the previous engine, and I don't know if the previous engine could somehow be meshed with Unreal Engine 4, or if they'd have to just not touch Unreal Engine 4 and they'd have to use their own proprietary engine, an upgraded version of it that they use for the Prime games. But however they do it, whether it's their own engine or some version of Unreal Engine 4, it still needs to have that Metroid Prime look to it. That, I think, is what they need to do. If suddenly the way the features of Samus, whether she's in her Zero suit or in the many different versions of her power suit and various suits she might be in, and the space pirates and all that stuff, if they just look and feel so different, like the way you compare the graphic and art style to like the Link character model in Skyward Sword to the one in Breath of the Wild, you see how vastly different those 2 character models are. If we get a similar change to new Samus models in this new game, it's just going to feel like, again, I'm not saying it would even make a bad game. It would probably still be a great game, but suddenly it just doesn't feel like a proper, true sequel. So what they need to do is keep the look, they need to keep the sound, all these different things I said. That's what they need to do for this Metroid Prime 4 game, in my opinion. Now, what I will say is that there is a way they still need to, and hopefully will, change or continue to change Metroid Prime with Metroid Prime 4 on the Switch. There are some things that I think obviously need to be done new and done differently. That is the common thing. We're going back to this idea of small evolutions in gameplay and presentation. That's the way you do it. And while there is, 90% parity and continuity with all of these different factors in the first 3 Prime games, there are also still small different changes to each game and how they feel. And also in some of the gameplay mechanics and the gameplay hooks. The perfect examples are, in Metroid Prime 2, it's the Echo's Visor. That was kind of like one of a couple main new gameplay hooks that really changed how you solved puzzles and traversed through that game and completed the game for Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. In Metroid Prime 3, it was the corruption of Phazon and your ability to overload yourself with Phazon and use the Phazon Blast attack to solve puzzles and defeat certain enemies and do certain things you couldn't do without it. And again, there are many other versions of that. There was motion control things that allowed you to solve puzzles and do combat in Metroid Prime 3. There were new visors that you were also using in Metroid Prime 2 that weren't the Echo Visor that allowed you to do cool things. There was also the light and the dark world mechanic, which was huge for Metroid Prime 2 and setting it apart from the other games. Those kinds of things, those are contextual. Those are things that feel very organically and naturally new to the Prime games as they kept going and evolved while still feeling true to the roots of that series. So, in basically wrapping this whole thing up, I think what we really hopefully need to see and will see with Metroid Prime 4 is something that feels like the jump from Prime to Prime 2 with new gameplay mechanics and the light and the dark world thing, and then Prime 3 with the phase-on corruption and the motion controls, which was new to specifically Prime 3 at that time, and then do a couple of new similar steps into Prime 4 with much better visuals that still look and feel like the Prime games. They can't do a Breath of the Wild. They can't do even probably a Mario Odyssey, even though, again, like I already said, Odyssey is a little bit in that gray area where it's kind of falls into both categories here. But, I mean, it really comes down to the Breath of the Wild comparison, I think. I'm pretty sure all of us can understand that difference there. And so, in wrapping this up, please bear in mind, change is good, new things are good, I welcome them. In fact, Metroid Prime 4 needs to have them, but they need to have the right ones. This new game can't feel so different to Metroid Prime that it won't even feel like a Prime game. They can't do that. It needs to feel like a natural Part 4 to this amazing series. I mean, basically my favorite games of all time. It needs to fit in properly and organically. And then the next Metroid, if that's where they do Metroid Samus the Revenge, that's where it's like, oh, a brand new Metroid with a brand new title, just like they did with Other M, for example. And I know, everyone hates Other M. I'm not getting into the opinions of the game, even though I like it. We're talking about how Other M was truly its own thing, kind of a sequel, but it was really being set up as its own thing. And that's kind of why they were able to get away with using their own sort of, I think, gameplay and graphical style and stuff. And again, I know that game is set between Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, but it's not like it's Super Metroid Part 2, the way Metroid 2 was like Metroid 2. So I think that's how they need to do it with the following Metroid game, but they can't do it with 4. So anyway, these are my thoughts. I get so heated and passionate and into the conversation about Metroid. I know I have so much to say on this topic because I'm just so excited this game is coming, and even though it's so far away and we don't know when we're going to see it, rumors say we're going to see it in July, but as I've discussed, I don't personally believe that. But hopefully next year we're going to see it soon, and it'll be really interesting to see which directions Nintendo does take. Are they going to go the drastically, radically different way like a lot of people have been suggesting? Or are they going to do what I'm suggesting they do and also hoping they do, and really just make it a proper Metroid Prime 4? You don't have to get any fancier than that. Just make it a true and natural sequel, and I think everything will work out just fine and that people will love it. So, you guys should definitely discuss Metroid Prime 4 below. What do you expect from the game? What do you want from the game? How different do you want it to be? How similar do you want it to be? So many different things to discuss when it comes to this game, and that will be it for today. So thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.